The massive spaceship touched down on the surface of Zaltar, a planet known for its stunning landscapes and mysterious alien culture. Jack, a human soldier, stepped out of the spacecraft and gazed at the strange, towering structures ahead of him. His mission was simple: attend a diplomatic meeting with the Zaltorian leaders and learn more about their peaceful ways. Little did he know, this mission would change his life forever. As Jack walked down the ramp, he was greeted by the Zaltorian ambassador, a tall alien with translucent skin and glowing eyes. The ambassador extended a hand to Jack, his face set in a formal expression. "Welcome to Zaltar, human. We're pleased to have you here." Jack shook the ambassador's hand and nodded, feeling the weight of the occasion. He had read all the reports about Zaltar, the planet's peaceful history, and its advanced technology. He was here to learn from them, to understand their ways. But he wasn't prepared for what came next. "You have a gift from our people," the ambassador said, turning toward a group of Zaltorian attendants. With a silent command, they stepped aside to reveal a young woman. She stood still, her eyes lowered, her hands clasped in front of her. Her face was beautiful, almost otherworldly. With pale skin that shimmered like moonlight, her long hair was dark as the night sky, flowing around her shoulders in waves. "Her name is Lyra," the ambassador continued, his tone calm and matter-of-fact. "She has been chosen to serve you during your stay here. She will be your companion and guide to help you understand our customs." Jack was taken aback. He wasn't sure what to think. The idea of having an alien servant was something he had never considered. Lyra didn't look like a servant. She stood tall, her posture perfect, and her presence was regal. She didn't smile. But there was something about her that commanded attention, a quiet strength that Jack couldn't ignore. "Thank you," Jack said politely, though his mind was racing. The ambassador smiled and nodded, signaling for the attendants to leave. Jack and Lyra were left standing alone. For the first few days, Jack tried to get to know Lyra. He asked her questions about her life, the Zaltorian people, and the planet. But every time he tried to dig deeper, she gave him only the barest of answers. She spoke of Zaltar with great respect, but rarely offered anything personal. She was always polite, always proper, but there was a certain distance in her manner. Jack soon realized that Lyra wasn't just any servant. She didn't act like one. While the other Zaltorian servants were quick to obey orders, Lyra remained calm and composed, always responding with careful thought and measured words. Jack noticed that when she walked into a room, others would often pause and watch her, almost as if they were waiting for her to speak first. It was as though they were all aware of something he wasn't. One evening, after a long day of diplomatic talks, Jack found himself alone in his quarters, reviewing his notes. He wasn't used to being waited on, especially by someone so distinguished. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. It was Lyra. "I've brought your evening meal," she said, stepping into the room with a tray of food. Jack looked up, surprised. She had been so formal with him, but she was offering him something so personal. "Thank you, Lyra," he said, gesturing to the table. As she set the tray down, Jack couldn't help but study her. She moved with a grace that was almost unnatural, as if her every action was measured and deliberate. The way she placed the tray on the table was no accidentee movement, was fluid, practiced, and careful. She turned to leave, but Jack stopped her. "Lyra, can I ask you something?" he said, his voice softer than usual. She paused, looking at him with those deep, mysterious eyes. "Of course," she replied, her voice steady. "Why do you act the way you do?" Jack asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. You're different from the others. You don't act like a servant. You carry yourself like you're someone important." Lyra's expression softened for a brief moment, though. It was hard to tell if it was regret or something else. She didn't speak for a long time, and Jack could see the internal struggle on her face. Finally, she said, "I was born to a different life." Jack's eyebrows furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I was not always a servant, Jack," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was born to a family of great importance, a family with a legacy and a future. But that was taken from me. I was forced to be here, to serve as a reminder of what was lost. Jack stared at her, stunned. He had no idea what she meant, but he knew that there was far more to her than met the eye. She wasn't just a servant. She wasn't just a simple alien. She was something else entirely, someone who had once had power, who had once held a position of influence, and now found herself trapped in a role she didn't deserve. "I didn't know," Jack said softly. "I'm sorry." Small, almost imperceptible smile on her lips. "It's not your fault." Jack watched her as she turned to leave, her back straight and her steps confident. As the door closed behind her, Jack sat back in his chair, his mind racing. He had been given this woman as a servant, but she was far more than that. There was a strength in her that he couldn't ignore, and it made him wonder, why had the Zaltorians given her to him? What were they really asking of him? The more he thought about it, the more he realized that this wasn't just a diplomatic mission. It was something bigger. And Jack was about to be swept into something that would change everything. The next few days were filled with awkward silences and uneasy conversations. Jack continued his diplomatic duties, meeting with the Zaltorian leaders, discussing trade, and learning about their culture. But his thoughts often drifted back to Lyra. Every time he looked at her, he saw the same calm, almost regal demeanor. It was as if she was playing a role, and Jack couldn't understand why. Lyra continued to serve him, offering meals, guiding him around the city, and handling any task with grace and efficiency. But she was different from the others, and Jack couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to her. She was not a servant, at least not in the way he understood the word. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Jack found himself alone in his quarters again. He sat at the small table, his thoughts lingering on Lyra. The way she carried herself, the way she spoke, there was something royal about her. It wasn't just the way she looked or acted, but the way others seemed to treat her. The other Zaltorians would always glance at her with respect, as though she were someone of great importance. Jack's curiosity grew. He couldn't just let it go. He needed to know who Lyra really was. He waited until the evening when Lyra came to deliver his meal. She stepped into the room, the usual calm and composed expression on her face. She placed the tray down on the table and stood there, waiting for him to speak. "Lyra," Jack began, his voice more serious than before. "I need to know something." Looked at him, her eyes calm but with a hint of uncertainty. "What is it, Jack?" "Why do you act the way you do?" Jack asked, leaning forward in his chair. "You don't seem like a servant. You ... carry yourself like you're someone important. You don't have to pretend with me. I've seen the way others treat you. I know you're not just a servant." Lyra didn't answer right away. She stood still, her eyes downcast as if considering something deep inside. Jack waited, unsure if she would respond. Finally, she sighed softly and looked up at him, her gaze direct and calm. "You are right," she said quietly. "I am not just a servant, but that is what I have become." Jack felt a pang of confusion. "What do you mean?" Lyra walked over to the window and stared out at the city lights. "I was once ... someone important. My family, my people, they ruled a powerful empire. I was the daughter of a king, raised to rule, to lead. But that was before everything changed." Jack's eyes widened. "You were a princess." Lyra nodded. Slowly, her expression softening, as if she was remembering something long lost. "Yes, I was once the heir to a great throne, but my family, we made enemies, powerful enemies. And when I was still very young, everything was taken from us. My kingdom, my people gone. And I was exiled here, forced to live among the Zaltorians. As punishment for my family's failures." Jack was speechless. He had never imagined such a story. The woman who had been placed in his care, the one who acted so poised and distant, had been a princess, a ruler. It was hard to believe, but the truth in her voice was undeniable. "I don't understand," Jack said softly. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Lyra turned back to him, her face a mixture of sadness and resolve. "Because I wasn't allowed to. The Zaltorians. They gave me to you as a servant, to keep me under control, to keep me away from anyone who might try to help me. They thought that by taking away everything I knew, I would become nothing, a mere tool for their use. But they don't understand. They don't understand that I'm still a princess. I'm still someone who deserves more than this. Sat in silence for a moment, taking in her words. It was difficult to imagine someone like Lyra, so poised and intelligent, being forced into a life she didn't deserve. She had been treated as a prisoner, as an object, when in reality, she was someone with a legacy, with power. The injustice of it all made Jack's blood boil. "I'm sorry, Lyra," Jack said, his voice filled with empathy. "I had no idea. But you don't have to stay here. You don't have to live like this." Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "And where would I go, my people? ... They are gone. My family is dead. I'm a stranger on this planet. Even if I could leave, what would I have left?" Walking over to her, "You have your strength, you have your intelligence, and you have a chance to fight back. If you want to reclaim your life, your throne, I'll help you. We can leave this place, and we can find a way to take back what's yours." Lyra's eyes searched his face, as if trying to determine if he was serious. She had spent so long in captivity, so long hiding her true identity, that it was hard for her to believe that someone like Jack would offer her a chance at freedom. "You would help me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack nodded. "I've seen the way you carry yourself. I know you're not just a servant. You're a princess, Lyra. And I don't believe you were meant to live this way." There was a long silence between them. Lyra looked down at the floor, thinking, considering the offer Jack had just made, could she really escape? Could she leave behind everything she had known and start over? Finally, she spoke, her voice filled with a quiet strength. "I don't know if I can ever be the person I was before, but I do know this. I'm not a servant, and I won't be treated like one any longer." Jack smiled, relief washing over him. "Then let's get you out of here. Together we can figure it out." Lyra looked at him, her eyes full of gratitude and something more hope. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her life could be different. The next few days were filled with a new sense of purpose. Jack and Lyra began to plan their escape, but it wasn't an easy task. The Zaltorians, though seemingly peaceful, were not fools. They had placed Lyra under his care for a reason, and they were watching. Every move Jack made was being observed. He could feel the eyes on him, but now he had something to fight for. He had Lyra, and she had a purpose. Lyra, despite the confusion and pain of the past few years, felt a new fire growing inside her. Jack's words had sparked something deep within her. For so long, she'd been forced to live in the shadows of her past. For the first time, she could see a future where she could reclaim her identity. The two of them met in Jack's quarters. Late one evening, the room was quiet, the stars outside visible through the large window. Lyra stood by the window, her face illuminated by the soft light. She had been lost in thought, but when Jack entered, she turned to face him. "Jack, I need to tell you something more," she said quietly. Jack sat down, giving her his full attention. "What is it?" Lyra hesitated, as if weighing her words carefully. "I wasn't just exiled because of my family's enemies. There's more to it. My people, the ones I was meant to rule, they ... They wanted me to marry someone who would strengthen our rule. They saw me as nothing more than a piece on a chessboard, someone to be used for alliances. They didn't care about me, Jack. They didn't care who I was or what I believed in. All they cared about was power." Jack frowned, his heart aching for her. "That's awful." "It is," she agreed, her voice soft. "But that's not the worst part. When I was exiled, my family's enemies didn't just want me out of the picture. They wanted to break me, to make sure that I could never come back. They made sure I was forced into a life of humiliation, stripped of everything I ever knew. The Zaltorians, they didn't know the full story. They thought I was just another lost royal, but they didn't understand how much I had lost." Could see the pain in her eyes. He wanted to reach out to comfort her, but he knew this wasn't something he could fix with words alone. This was deeper, more painful. Lyra had lost everything: her family, her kingdom, her people. Now, she was being forced to live in a foreign world, a world that had taken away her identity. "I'm sorry, Lyra," Jack said softly. "You didn't deserve any of this. You don't have to live like this anymore. We can fight back." Lyra's gaze softened. "You've been kind to me, Jack, more than anyone ever has. I don't know if I can trust that things can ever be different, but I want to believe you. I want to believe that I can reclaim what was stolen from me." Jack stood up and walked toward her. We'll make it happen. I'll help. You." For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to smile. A small, faint smile. But it was enough to show Jack that maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe in herself again. The days that followed were a blur of planning and preparation. Jack and Lyra had to move carefully, keeping their actions hidden from the Zaltorian leaders who had been keeping close watch. Jack worked quickly, using his knowledge of military strategy to come up with a plan. They would need to get off the planet, and they would need to do it quietly. No one could know what they were up to until it was too late. One evening, Jack and Lyra met in secret again, this time in a quiet courtyard hidden from the Zaltorians. The place was calm, serene, and Jack felt a sense of urgency settle in his chest. "I've made contact with someone who can help us," Jack said, looking around cautiously. "There's a ship, a small one. It's not much, but it's enough to get us off Zaltor and away from the Zaltorians." Lyra's eyes widened. "A ship? How?" "A friend of mine from Earth owes me a favor," Jack explained. "He's a smuggler, but he's reliable. I've arranged for him to pick us up in 3 days." Lyra's face brightened slightly, but she quickly hid the expression. "3 days," she murmured. "That's not much time." "I know," Jack said. "But we can't wait any longer. The longer we stay here, the more likely they are to catch on. We need to leave now, before it's too late." Lyra nodded, her determination growing stronger. "Then let's do it. I'm ready." Jack felt a surge of pride. She had always been strong, but now she was beginning to reclaim the strength she had lost so long ago. She wasn't just a servant anymore. She was a princess, a leader, someone with a purpose. Over the next few days, the two of them prepared for the escape. Jack took extra precautions, making sure they weren't being watched. Lyra, though nervous, helped as much as she could. She had once been a leader, and she had skills that Jack could use: skills in strategy, diplomacy, and even combat. But as the days passed, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that the Zaltorians were getting closer. He noticed small things: whispers in the hallways, an unusual number of guards around Lyra's quarters. It was as though they suspected something, though they didn't know exactly what. Finally, the day arrived. Jack and Lyra made their way to the secret hangar where the ship would meet them. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as they approached the ship. They were so close now, so close to freedom. But they weren't the only ones watching. The days leading up to their escape had been filled with tension. Jack could feel it in the air: the quiet whispers in the corridors, the guarded glances, the extra patrols around the city. It was as though the Zaltorians were watching them, more closely than ever before. The plan to escape needed to be perfect, or else everything would fall apart. Lyra had been a valuable ally in the preparations. She wasn't just a princess. She was smart, resourceful, and determined. Her knowledge of Zaltor's systems and the palace layout had been invaluable. Together, they had mapped out their route to the hidden hangar where the ship would meet them. It wasn't far, but the path was risky. They would need to avoid the Zaltorian patrols and get to the ship undetected. 3 days had passed since. Jack made the arrangements with the smuggler. He had a feeling they were running out of time. Every morning, he woke up with a sense of urgency, wondering if today would be the day the Zaltorians finally discovered their plan. He couldn't let that happen, not now, not when they were so close. On the morning of the escape, Jack and Lyra stood in his quarters, preparing for the journey ahead. Lyra had changed into a simple outfit, one that would blend in with the local populace. It wasn't royal or regalate. It was practical and low-key, just like the new life she was about to begin. "You ready?" Jack asked, his voice low. Lyra nodded. her expression calm but resolute. "I'm ready. Let's go." The two of them moved quickly through the corridors, staying close to the walls and using the shadows to hide their movements. Jack led the way, keeping a sharp eye out for any guards. Lyra followed closely behind, her every step careful, her eyes scanning for any sign of danger. She had once commanded armies, but now she was acting as a fugitive, moving quietly and with purpose. As they approached the hangar, Jack's heart began to race. This was it. They were so close, and yet so far away from freedom. The hangar was hidden beneath a series of storage rooms, out of sight from the main palace. The only way to access it was through a narrow, concealed passageway. Jack had scouted the area the night before, making sure there were no surprises. The passageway was dark, air cool and musty, but Jack and Lyra moved through it with practiced ease. They had done this countless times in their minds, but now that it was real, the weight of the situation began to settle in as they neared the hangar door. Jack stopped and turned to Lyra. "We need to be quick," he whispered. "Once we're inside, we'll have to move fast. The ship won't wait long." Lyra gave him a quick nod, her face tense with anticipation. "I understand. Let's get out of here." Jack pressed his hand against the door and it slid open. With a quiet hiss, the hangar was empty, save for the small ship waiting in the far corner. The ship was not much to look at, just a small, rugged vessel designed for stealth and speed. It wasn't built for comfort, but it would get them to safety. But as they moved into the hangar, something felt off. Jack's instincts told him that they weren't alone. He glanced around, scanning the shadows. His hand instinctively reached for the blaster at his side. "Stay close," he whispered to Lyra, his voice tense. Lyra moved silently, her eyes narrowed as she too sensed the danger. "I don't like this, Jack. It's too quiet." Suddenly, a loud noise echoed through the hangar, a series of footsteps. Jack and Lyra froze. The footsteps were coming from the far side of the room. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. He was sure they hadn't been spotted, but he couldn't take any chances. Without a word, Jack grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her behind a stack of crates. They crouched down, trying to make themselves as small as possible. Jack's eyes stayed focused on the figure moving toward them. A Zaltorian guard appeared, his body tall and imposing, with glowing eyes scanning the room. Jack held his breath, praying the guard wouldn't notice them. The guard paused for a moment, as if sensing something was off. Then, just as quickly as he had appeared, he turned and walked away, heading toward the far end of the hangar. Jack exhaled in relief, but only for a moment. "That was too close," he whispered. "We need to move now." They darted across the room, making their way toward the ship. The sound of the guard's footsteps faded, but Jack knew they couldn't afford to waste any more time. They had to get to the ship and leave before the Zaltorians realized what was happening. The small vessel sat waiting in the far corner, its engines already powered up and ready to go. Jack reached the ship first, and as he climbed inside, he turned to help Lyra. She followed him, moving swiftly and gracefully. Despite the tension in the air, once inside, Jack secured the hatch, and the ship's engines roared to life. The vessel lifted off the ground, and they were airborne. Jack glanced at Lyra, who was staring out the window, her expression a mix of relief and disbelief. "We're really doing this," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. Jack nodded, his grip tight on the controls. "We are." The ship soared higher, leaving Zaltor behind. Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of freedom that he hadn't experienced in a long time. They were out. They were free. But as they sped through the atmosphere, Jack knew their journey was far from over. The Zaltorians would eventually notice their disappearance, and when they did, they would come after them with everything they had. Lyra turned to face him, her eyes steady. "Where are we going?" Jack looked out at the stars ahead. "Anywhere. But here, we'll figure it out. Together." For the first time in a long time, Lyra smiled. It was small, but it was genuine, a smile that said she believed in this new life, in the hope that Jack had given her. As the ship raced through space, Jack and Lyra knew that the hardest part was yet to come. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough. The ship's engines hummed steadily as Jack piloted them through the stars. The vastness of space stretched out before them, an endless sea of dark, peaceful void. But Jack knew better than to relax. They had escaped Zaltar, but they hadn't escaped their problems. We're still being hunted, and the Zaltorians were not a force to be underestimated. "Do you think they'll follow us?" Lyra asked, her voice breaking the silence. Jack glanced over at her. Her face was calm, but there was a tension in her posture that betrayed her worry. She had every reason to be concerned. They weren't just running away, they were fleeing from a planet that had once been her home, from the people who had treated her like a prisoner. And now, those same people would do anything to get her back. "They'll come after us," Jack said, his tone serious. "Zaltorians don't give up easily. They'll track us down. They have resources, ships, soldiers, technology. They won't catch us if we stay ahead of them." Lyra nodded, though the doubt in her eyes didn't fade. She had never been in this kind of situation before. As a princess, she had been used to control, to security. This life, running from one place to the next, was new and frightening. She was no longer a ruler. She was a fugitive. "We have to be careful," she said, her voice steady but soft. "I don't know if I can keep running forever." Jack knew what she meant. Every step they took away from Zaltar brought them closer. Two unknown dangers. They had no allies, no safe place to go. It's just the ship and each other. He wasn't sure where they would end up, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going to let anything happen to Lyra. She had come too far, endured too much, to give up now. "We'll find a way," Jack said firmly. "We've made it this far. We just have to keep moving." The days that followed were filled with unease. They moved through uncharted space, carefully avoiding major spaceports and planets where they might be noticed. Jack kept the ship on the move, never staying in one place too long, always watching the skies for signs of pursuit. But it wasn't just the Zaltorians they had to worry about. As they flew deeper into uncharted space, the risks of running into unknown dangers grew. Pirates, hostile factions, or even just the harsh conditions of space could be enough to end their journey. But Lyra didn't mind the uncertainty. She had lived through far worse. What truly bothered her was the guilt that gnawed at Hertha, fear that Jack was sacrificing too much for her. He had risked everything to help her, and she wasn't sure she deserved it. One evening, as Jack prepared the ship for another jump into deeper space, Lyra approached him. She stood in the doorway of the cockpit, watching him work. He glanced up and gave her a small smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Jack, I need to talk to you," Lyra said, her voice hesitant. "Sure," he replied, turning off the controls and giving her his full attention. "What's on your mind?" Lyra hesitated for a moment, then walked into the cockpit and sat down beside him. She looked at the stars outside the window as if trying to find the right words. "I don't want you to feel like you have to keep helping me," she said softly. "You've done so much already. You've saved me, gotten me out of Zaltar. But I don't know how much longer I can keep running like this. It's exhausting. And I feel like I'm dragging you into something you didn't sign up for." Jack didn't say anything right away. He simply sat there, listening to her, trying to understand what she was feeling. After a moment, he reached over and put a hand on hers, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "You don't have to worry about me, Lyra," he said, his voice steady. "I'm doing this because I want to. I don't care about what I signed up for. I care about you. As long as you need help, I'll be here." Lyra turned to him, her eyes wide with surprise. "But Jack, this isn't just about me. Dangerous. The Zaltorians won't stop, and they'll keep coming after you, too. I can't ask you to risk everything for me." Jack smiled softly. "I already have, haven't I? Besides, what's the point of fighting for a cause if you don't believe in it? I believe in you, Lyra, and I believe we can make this work." The sincerity in his words made Lyra's heart swell. She had always known that Jack was kind, but now she saw the depth of his loyalty. He wasn't just helping her because it was the right thing to do. He was helping her because he believed in her. And for the first time in a long time, she believed. In herself, too. "Thank you, Jack," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. He nodded, his smile growing. "No need to thank me. Just focus on what's ahead. We'll figure this out together." As they settled into a new routine, the bond between them deepened. They became a Team Jack the soldier and Lyra the princess in exile. They shared the ship's cramped quarters, working together to navigate through space and evade pursuit. Every moment was a new challenge, but they faced it with determination, knowing that each day brought them closer to freedom, but the Zaltorians were closing. Jack had noticed an uptick in activity on the long-range scanners. A fleet was moving toward their last known position, and it wouldn't be long before they caught up. They had to act fast. One day, as the ship sailed through a narrow asteroid, Jack spotted something on the scanners. A ship large, heavily armed, and unmistakably Zaltorian was heading straight for them. "We've got company," Jack muttered, his fingers flying over the controls. "We need to leave now." Lyra's eyes widened in alarm. "Can we outrun them?" Jack didn't hesitate. "I'm not sure, but we're going to try." With a sharp turn, the ship jolted into motion, racing through the asteroid field. Hands were steady on the controls, but his mind raced. They had only one shot at this. Behind them, the Zaltorian ship followed, cutting through the asteroids with ease. The pursuit had begun in earnest. The ship lurched forward as Jack pushed the throttle to its limit. The Zaltorian ship was still behind them, and the distance between the two vessels was slowly closing. Jack's heart raced as he navigated through the asteroid field, weaving between the massive rocks with expert precision. Every second counted. "Hold on," Jack shouted over the roar of the engines as the ship jolted again, narrowly avoiding a large asteroid. He could feel the strain of the maneuver, but the ship held steady. Lyra, who had been sitting quietly beside him, now gripped the edge of her seat, her eyes fixed on the scanners. "They're getting closer," she said, her voice calm but filled with urgency. "I know," Jack replied, his gaze darting between the controls and the asteroid field ahead. He knew the Zaltorians were better equipped, more advanced. But he had one thing on his side: speed, and a ship designed for stealth, not direct confrontation. He just needed to keep them ahead for a little while longer. "Can you see anything?" "Up ahead?" Jack asked, trying to focus on the path ahead while keeping one eye on the pursuing Zaltorian ship. Lyra's eyes narrowed as she studied the scanners. "There's a small moon coming up. It could be an escape route, lots of cover. But it's risky. If we don't make it through, they'll catch us for sure." Jack weighed the options quickly. The asteroid field was too dangerous to continue weaving through for much longer. The Zaltorians would catch up before they could find another way out. But the moon, it might give them the cover they needed. "Take us in," Jack said, his voice firm. "It's our best shot." Lyra didn't hesitate. She turned to the controls, expertly guiding the ship toward the moon. The ship's thrusters roared as they hurtled through space, the Zaltorian ship still hot on their tail. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as they neared the moon's surface. "We need to make it through the atmosphere," Jack said, looking over at Lyra. "We can't risk staying in open space for long." "I know," Lyra said, her expression set with determination. "Just stay steady. We'll get through." The ship shuddered as it entered the moon's atmosphere. Jack could feel the heat building around them as they descended, the ships shields working hard to protect them from the intense friction. Outside, the stars blurred into streaks of light as they raced downward. "Hold on," Jack shouted again as the ship jerked, the atmosphere growing thicker. Lyra tightened her grip on the controls, her face a picture of focus. "We're almost there. Just a few more seconds." With a final burst of speed, the ship shot through the atmosphere and into the moon's surface. They were in the clear for now, but they couldn't relax yet. The Zaltorian ship was still in pursuit, but it would have to contend with the rocky terrain and the moon's uneven surface. "They're not giving up," Jack muttered, his eyes scanning the rear view. The Zaltorian ship was still visible, although it had slowed down. Couldn't follow them into the moon's surface. They had bought themselves a little time. Lyra let out a breath of relief. "We made it," she said, but there was no time to celebrate. "But this isn't over. Come after us. We need to keep moving." "Agreed," Jack said. "We've got a little time before they figure out where we went. Let's make it count." Jack took a moment to check their systems. ensuring everything was running smoothly. They had taken a hit when they entered the atmosphere and the ships. Shields were down to 50%. They couldn't afford any more damage. "Are you sure the ship can make it?" Lyra asked, her voice laced with concern. "It'll hold together," Jack said, trying to reassure her. "We checked the fuel levels. But we'll need to refuel soon. You can't keep running on empty." Lyra nodded. "We'll figure it out. I'm sure there's a station somewhere on the moon. Just have to find it." Jack set a course toward the far side of the moon, where the scanners indicated there might be a hidden outpost. It wasn't the most ideal situation, but it was their best shot as the ship made its way through the craggy landscape of the moon. Jack couldn't help but think about how far they had come. Just days ago, they had been stuck on Zaltar, forced to live under the watchful eyes of their enemies. Now, they were free on the run, yes, but free. And they were in this together. "This place is nothing like Zaltar," Lyra said as she gazed. Out the window, the moon's surface was barren and rugged, covered in dust and jagged rocks. There were no signs of life here, just the silent, empty landscape. "No, it's not," Jack agreed, his voice quiet, "but it's ours now. We'll find a way to make it through." Lyra turned to him, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Thank you, Jack, for everything." Jack smiled back. "You don't have to thank me. We're in this together." Just then, the ship's alarm blared, and a warning light flashed on the control panel. Jack's heart skipped a beat. "They found us," he muttered. Lyra looked at him, her eyes wide with panic. "What do we do now?" "We run," Jack said, a grin spreading across his face. "We fight if we have to." The Zaltorian ship had entered the moon's atmosphere, and it was fast approaching. Jack wasn't going to let them catch up without a fight. He had Lyra's back, and he wasn't going to lose her now. They were far from safe, but they had something. The Zaltorians didn't each other. That was enough to keep them going.